On today's show, we're going to be thinking about whether there are aspects of doctrine or teachings that we have in the church that we struggle with sometimes, and whether it's okay to have those struggles.
Welcome to today's episode of TGI Monday. We're still in Epiphany, which is a church season that comes straight after Christmas, and it's about those bing, light bulb, revelation moments. So when people say, "Oh, I've had an epiphany," they mean that they've kind of discovered something. And so before we get into our question, I wanted to ask you, did you have an epiphany moment? Or what was that sort of dawning moment for you in your Christian faith, if there was one?
I felt a bit stupid when I suddenly realised that every leper that Jesus healed, every blind person that he restored the sight to, every person he raised from the dead, are actually all dead.
They went ahead and died afterwards.
I was asked to preach on healing, and I suddenly thought, oh yeah, they're not still hanging around like Lazarus millennia later going, "Oh, that Jesus fella. All my mates are dead."
I was just getting comfy as well, and he got me back up.
That's a funny thought.
That is, isn't it?
Never thought about that.
Oh, well, there's another ping, there goes an epiphany. You had any others, Tamar?
Not that I can think of. I can't remember anything. Sorry, I looked directly at the camera. Do we have to start again?
No?
Okay.
No, it's okay.
No, we look all over the place. What about you, Mary?
Well, I didn't have an epiphany moment when I first came to New Arnwood, but I do occasionally get epiphany moments, and I remember a particular one a couple of years ago when I just realised about forgiveness. So obviously I knew what forgiveness was about, but it came to me that actually I'd always thought that I want to ask God for forgiveness for him, sort of thing, so that I can be on a level playing.
Oh yeah, so he's no longer furious with you.
Yeah. But I realised actually it's all for me. Forgiveness is all for my benefit.
It's all about you.
It's
well,
most things
you.
are. But sorry. But it was all for my benefit that he was forgiving the things that I'd done. That actually, when I was thinking he couldn't let things go, he'd already let them go.
Yeah. God didn't.
Me that
God
was holding
didn't need
on to do.
Otherwise, that would be God being healed from the things that were bothering him. And
But
that wouldn't make sense.
I hadn't got that. So I certainly hadn't got it in that way. In that it was just clear. It was a grace.
Very good. Well, our question from MC, thank you MC on YouTube for your question. It's a doozy. She asks,
on today's show, we're going to be thinking about whether there are aspects of doctrine or teachings that we have in the church that we struggle with sometimes, and whether it's okay to have those struggles.
are there parts of the Christian doctrine, which she does this for, or belief that you occasionally struggle with? Now, obviously, none of us have ever struggled with anything at all to do with our faith, except quite often. I can definitely kick off with saying that there's quite often things that suddenly seem harder to live with or harder to understand. And mine came sort of linked in with an epiphany. A thing I used to really struggle with was people say, "Oh, God loves you. God so loves you." And I'd be like, well, he kind of has to love everybody, so that doesn't really feel like anything to me, and you're just saying that, so it doesn't connect in any way. And that was when I thought love was about feeling something, and for me that was always something that was really difficult, and I found a real struggle. But gradually I've come to discover that love is an action. So, what we do and how we love one another doesn't depend on our feelings at all, or even how lovely things are. So, weirdly, knowing that God was love was something that I found quite just hard to grasp, I suppose. What about you? Paul, what do you think?
Well, the whole question of suffering.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's wars, there's man, and it's usually men creating suffering. There's natural disasters, tsunami, whatnot. So when God was creating the cosmos, why not just say, "Let there be paradise"? da-da,
Yeah.
instead of let there be Ebola virus and let there be holocausts and earthquakes
Yeah.
and all these horrible things and babies getting cancer. And then maybe some heaven after that, and how that balances up with an all-loving God.
Yeah. You must get asked that a lot. I do.
What do you generally say?
I'm too busy, call me later.
I've got somebody I can put you in touch with. No, I generally talk about Jesus suffering on the cross, and that actually the reason that Jesus was born as a little baby, thinking about Epiphany again, the reason that happened was so that, we could know that God knows the suffering that we go through.
I know, and I don't have a problem with that, because is God some sort of sadomasochist?
God wants everybody.
God's into pain.
Yeah.
Well, no, but God wants to experience what He's given us to experience, and actually, I don't really understand how it would be possible to give us freedom and free will without the difficulties that we have, without the suffering that we experience.
This is where Hal, had he been on the panels down, we miss you, Hal, would be talking, because I heard him talk a lot about this, and actually suffering is a huge question, isn't it, that people want to talk about. And
He'd be talking about Machine Gun Preacher.
Oh, yeah, no. He'd be talking about some
AC/DC.
obscure film, but he would also talk about, without vulnerability, there isn't love, and so God didn't turn us into machines, but we're part of something in which God is part of that, and it isn't God that causes the suffering. We can be those who create suffering, and ultimately it's evil that causes suffering. So when we are greedy and abuse the resources we've got, ultimately that's the opposite of who God is, and it's God among us and in that helps us to see beyond that suffering. But that's the stuff that I end up talking about as well. What about you, Tamar? Are there Christian beliefs or doctrines that you find occasionally MC allows a struggle?
I don't think there's any big things. There's obviously there's suffering and stuff, but I feel kind of content with what I believe about that. But I think sometimes when I'm reading the Bible, I'll come across something and I'm just like, why the heck did that happen? Me and Matt have recently been reading Acts, and there's a bit where a guy sells his field and doesn't give all the money to charity or something.
Yeah.
And then he dies on the spot. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and then his wife gets struck down as well.
Yeah.
I'm just like, and then they just move on and talk about something else. I'm just like, wait a minute. Why did that happen? And that was after Jesus. That was the disciples do it, not doing it, but do you know what I mean? It's something that's, occasionally I'll come across stuff and I'm just like, that doesn't make sense with the God that I know.
No, well, and that comes down to something that I think is commonly talked about on this show, that actually one of the things we struggle with, and certainly struggle to agree on, is the Bible, or how we read the Bible. Because that story that you're talking about is just kind of on its own, and it would be an excellent rhetorical device or a literary device to frighten people into not being generous with their goods, wouldn't it? So I have a suspicion. Yeah, I'm trying not to use those sorts of words, but it's okay to wrestle with passages and go,
not take things
I don't like this passage.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. But is it all right to struggle with your faith at all?
I think it is. But if I was to look at that question about doctrine, actually that's pretty tricky in the Anglican Church, because actually we don't hold specifically to lots of doctrines. We hold to a statement of faith, which is the creed. But you can be a Calvinist and hold to Calvinist doctrines and be an Anglican. And go to Church of England church. You can follow Lutheran principles and come to a Church of England. You can be, wedded to a lot of the catechisms, the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church, and be a Church of England member. It's really difficult to say what doctrines that I struggle with, because actually I have a freedom in Anglicanism.
Yes.
I have a beautiful joy that I can work out what I think from the best theology that's around I can choose from. And there are things that seem to make sense with the God that I understand, with the Jesus that I've got to know, what faith is all about. But actually I don't have to pigeonhole myself I don't have to feel like I don't fit into a certain party in the church because I belong.
Because we do disagree on quite a few things within Christian tradition, and that is something that I've heard it said a lot, and I think it's true that doubt isn't the opposite of faith. It's part of faith, and that doubt is normal because struggle tends to keep you thinking about things and keep you praying and keep you talking, which is really, really important. Because actually, if we get ourselves adrift when we disagree, it ends up being that we perhaps lose sight of all of it. And quite often, we need each other to help keep walking this road. And it's a broad one, and God is walking with us, whether we're full of faith or full of doubt.
Thanks for watching. Remember to like, share and subscribe, and most of all, send us in your questions.
Did you say lurk?
Remember
Remember to lurk.
Remember to
Lurk on our YouTube channel, lurk on the Facebook page.
I'm being transported to Blackadder Series 3, I think.
Should I have a go?
I think we should encourage lurking and liking.
I think we should.